Okay, we're live.
Good afternoon for the second time. Again, just in case you missed it, due to technical issues, my name's Denzel. I'm a solicitor from Monmouth County Council and the legal advisor for the Planning Committee. We have just completed item 1 on the agenda, and we've elected Councillor Edwards as the chair of the Planning Committee. Under the Local Government and Elections Act 2021, we have an obligation to make meetings open to the public, but a technical difficulty won't have negated the decision we just took. As such, I'll hand over to Councillor Edwards now to continue the meeting. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Denzel, and I must apologise to anybody that we do get these technical hitches. I think it was wrong of me to say it might be a short meeting, but thank you all once again for this position and the support that you all give me. As it is one of the, I think the largest committee that we have in the council, your attendance is really spot on. We have a very, very high attendance in this committee, so I know you're all very dedicated to it. And also it gives me confidence as chair because you do 99% of the time attend. Hopefully with your help we'll make it a good year going forward, as last year we managed it well professionally, considering the remote working with COVID, and that you all did a lot of hard work for that, and we managed to keep on with the planning committee, although it has been difficult at times, but I really do appreciate it. And I also appreciate the patience and the professionalism of our planning officers and democratic services, because they've had a lot of work to do, as you could see this afternoon. Anyway, I won't carry on anymore, but thank you ever so much for voting me in as chair again. I'll do my best as usual. And I now go to number 2 on the agenda, and this will be the appointment of vice chair.
Peter Clark.
I'll second that.
I second that. Sheila, can I second that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Sheila. Councillor Woodhouse. And who nominated in the beginning? I missed it. I can't always hear.
Myself, Ruth.
Who was that?
Dave Evans.
Right. Councillor Evans nominated Councillor Peter Clark as vice chair, and it was seconded by Councillor Sheila Woodhouse. Thank you very much indeed. Before we go on to declarations and members of anything else, I will read out the spiel that I have to do before we start any committee, and I'm welcome as usual Councillor Clark on the right hand. He's always been a great support to me over the years anyway, and we all know him well, and he takes it very seriously. So welcome everyone to this meeting, the Planning Committee, which is held fully remotely. The meeting is being held in accordance with the emergency legislation that enables the council to hold this meeting remotely, alongside the council's constitution, and ensures that the council can continue to operate and make democratic decisions in an open and transparent way. I would like to remind members that this meeting is being held and streamed live to the public, and can I request that you all switch off your cameras and also mute your microphones when you are not speaking directly to the committee, to ensure there is no unnecessary background noise. All sections of the Members' Code of Conduct will apply to members in this virtual meeting environment and are as applicable now as they are in a traditional meeting setting. Can I also remind members of the meeting to ensure their chat functionality is switched on, and should they wish to speak on a particular item, to make the request clear in that area, and I will then invite you to speak at the relevant point in the meeting, where you would then unmute your microphone and switch on your camera back on, please. Decisions of this remote committee will hold the same weight as a decision of a normal planning committee, provided that the meeting remains quorate and meets its legislative requirement to make a decision, regardless of whether a member of this meeting is unable to cast their vote due to technical issues. The decision of the committee will remain valid. So thank you all. I ought to be able to read this off by heart by now and not read it off a sheet of paper, but we have to be seen to be doing it all accurately and professionally. So now I will now ask for apologies of absence, please.
Just from Councillor Webb, Chair.
Right, thank you very much indeed, Richard. No other apologies then, so we must be very good attendance again today. Declarations of interest, please. No declarations of interest? Right, thank you very much indeed. Would somebody move the accuracy of the meetings of the last meeting? And that wasn't last month, it was the month before. And I will sign them if there are no reasons for any inaccuracies. I will sign them when I'm next in County Hall. Can anybody move? No problems?
I've asked for I've put a note in the chat bar, Chair.
Sorry, Councillor Brown.
Sorry, I've put a note in the chat bar, Chair, to ask if
yes, I have just picked it up, Councillor Brown. I believe you have some problems on page 8.
That's right. It's just that on page 8, the bullet point that says to ensure the approved building is ancillary but is not used for guest accommodation in association with the primary wedding function use or as a separate residential use. It should just say, but is not used for accommodation or as a separate residential use. This would then conform with the condition within the approval notice.
Right, thank you, Councillor Brown. That will be noted. So do you wish then to move the minutes with that corrected?
Yes, please, Chair.
Right, thank you. Do you have a seconder for the minutes?
Seconded, Chairman.
I believe that was Jim Higginson.
Correct, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Higginson. So right, we now go on to the planning applications of the day. And as you will see on the agenda, there are only 2 applications in front of us today. But we have public speaking and statements that Craig has also got to read out. So I'll hand over now to the first of the applications this afternoon. Who's presenting that one? Is it you, Phil?
It's me, Chair. Thank you.
Right.
Sorry, I was just trying to click the camera on.
Right, introduce yourself, please, Amy, for those who are looking in. Thank you.
Of course. Many thanks, Chair. My name is Amy Longford. I'm the Area Team and Heritage Manager at Monmouthshire County Council. So we're just getting the slide up. Bear with a second. So this application, DM 2019-01495, is for the construction of 2 dwellings together with the formation of car parking following the amended development description dated the 14th of Jan 2020. The application is presented to committee at the request of Councillor Brown to assess the implications of the proposal in the commercial viability of the community facility in line with policy CRF1 and the concerns with regards to highway safety. So the application site lies the northeastern edge of Shire Newton and relates to the Tan House public house overlooking the junction at the top of Sprout Hill. The site is within the development boundary and forms the edge of Shire Newton Conservation Area. The site is also outside the defined riparian special area of conservation or phosphate sensitive area. The pink lines on the slide here relate to the conservation area, and the black in the top northeastern corner shows the edge of the defined development boundary. At present, the Tan House is not operating as a business and is currently vacant. The site is partly grassed with some disused children play equipment and an open car park, again for use with the Tan House when in operation. The application specifically excludes the public house and relates solely to the car park and garden area associated with the Tan House. The aerial view, if we can just move to the next slide, shows the red line of the application site incorporating the grassed areas to the east of the Tan House, with residential properties to the north, east and south. The next slide shows the Tan House as being in the same ownership, but excluded from the red line boundary and therefore not part of this application. So policy CRF1 relates to the retention of community facilities where applications are received for their change to an alternative use. This application is not for the change of the use of the Tan House public house. The application is only for the redevelopment of part of the site incorporating the car park and part of the play area. However, as per the officer's report in paragraph 6.1, this policy has been considered as the application includes part of the curtilage of the community facility. Consideration must therefore be given to the potential for the development as proposed to impact on this community facility. It is important to note that there are other public houses within the village which have the legal operative use to operate as a public house, and 2 further pub or restaurants available within walking distance. The redevelopment of the car park and play area does not remove all external space from the townhouse. The business still retains a sufficient level of car parking spaces, 15 spaces, and some modest external space. It is not considered that the remaining external space would preclude the operation of the townhouse as a commercial business. There remains sufficient space and facilities for the business to operate once more. To note, prior permission would not be required for someone to reopen the public house at any time. The application, reference has been made to the condition of the building. However, as this is not part of the application site, it's not part of the assessment of this development. Therefore, the application is considered to be in compliance with policy CRF1. So please can we move to the next slide? Thanks. So this shows the existing site plan.
Excuse me, Amy, could you hold a moment, please, Amy? I think some of the members are having difficulty with the presentation. Is Wendy or Nicola there in Democratic Services to mention to any members now?
Yes, Chair. It seems it's only Councillor Howard who can't see the presentation, so I'm not really sure why. It seems that all other members can. We have got that showing on the live event.
Right.
I'm not really sure what to do there, so leave it with me anyway. I'll see what I can do.
Right, thank you very much indeed, Wendy, Nicola. Right, carry on then, Amy. Sorry about that.
That's all right, no problem. So this slide shows the existing site plan with an open area of 0.12 hectares, including 2 storage containers there to the eastern boundary. The present site is bounded to the north and part of the western boundary with a tree line, and the southern and eastern fringe retains a fence to demark the boundary of the site adjacent to the road. Vehicular entrance is from the south via the existing access. So the next slide will show us the proposed site plan. So the application proposes the construction of 2 detached dwellings shown on the site plan as dwelling A and dwelling B, positioned to face the road with rear gardens onto the centre of the site. Both dwellings are proposed to be 4-bedroom properties with 3 allocated parking spaces each. Dwelling A is located to the southeast corner and dwelling B to the northern eastern corner. The dwellings are 9.85 metres wide, 6.4 metres deep, with pitched roofs and a finishing ridge height of 8.25 metres and an eaves height of 4.8. The principal elevations are facing onto Sprout Hill, and both are angled to follow the line of the road. The next slide will show us the elevations of dwelling A, a double-fronted simple design with a central porch. The roofs of the dwellings are proposed to be a natural slate with rough cast render and stone quoins and sills. The windows and doors are proposed to be powder coated aluminium. The next slide will show us the floor plans. A simple 4-bedroom property, living, dining and kitchen on the ground floor. Dwelling B, the next slides, is very similar with some changes to the front elevation to accommodate issues of overlooking. But again, as we can see on the next slide of the floor plan, the same floor plan as dwelling A. So the application is in principle subject to the normal material considerations. So if we can just quickly return back to the first slide, the aerial view, the site plan if possible. That one, that's great, thank you. The design and the setting of the dwellings are considered to sit perfectly within the conservation area, mainly being read in connection with the more modern dwellings along the eastern approach road. They're considered to be in character with the scale of the surrounding buildings and those within the conservation area. In terms of neighbour amenity, the site is bounded by other residential properties. However, those to the south are separated by a road and approximately 26 metres from the development, which is considered to be acceptable. In addition, a similar situation with the existing property of number 9 Tan Court, which is on the northwestern side above or just north of the townhouse itself. A distance of 28 metres separates the rear of that property with dwelling B, which will be the closest, as well as the existing screening. To the north, there is a property of Tamina. I hope I'm pronouncing that properly. This is 16 metres from the side elevation of the proposed dwelling B. A Juliet balcony is proposed on the northern gable of B. However, dwelling B sits forward from the building line from Tamina and has an elevated position with an existing bank of trees in between. Given the offset position of the proposed dwelling and the existing tree line, the proposed enhancements to the landscaping of this area, it is considered that the privacy will be maintained and views will be of the wider landscape rather than directly into the neighbour's garden. To the east, we can see St. Egwynt. There is a distance of 17 metres between the front elevation of the existing property and the proposed dwelling B, which would sit directly opposite. The adopted SPG, in relation to paragraph 7.4, states that directly facing windows should have a distance of 21 metres. However, this distance can be relaxed where properties face a public highway. In this instance, there is a public highway in between the dwellings. In addition, the internal layout has been reconsidered to orientate living space windows, specifically in bedroom 1 and the kitchen, to the side of property away from St. Egwynt. Given the relaxation of the key distances in this instance, as set out in the SPG, it is considered that the impact on the amenity is not so great, such a warrant refusal. Sorry, can we just pop back to the photographs now? We can have a look at the site in context. Oh, there we go. So the first view here shows the site looking towards the front elevation of St. Egwynt, showing the current parking area, 2 containers and the closed boarded fence around the boundary of the site. The next slide shows the former play equipment and views towards Tamina to the north, beyond the trees. And the next slide shows a closer view up of where dwelling B will be positioned. And the next is taken from within the site, looking directly at St. Egwynt, opposite the proposed dwelling B. And the next, this is taken towards Ballintober, which would be opposite dwelling A, looking south. The next slide shows views looking west towards the rear of the townhouse, High Mead and Lower House there, looking across the site. The next slide, we're looking more north towards the rear of number 9 Townhouse Court. Again, this view looking to the site towards the west or southwest, towards the rear of the townhouse, looking up the approach road. And this is looking opposite the site at the top of Sprout Hill. And the next. Again, we are looking east there with the townhouse on the one side of the road, the tree-lined boundary to the other side, looking at the entrance into the car park there.
Mm-hmm.
And the last 2 views there are showing left and right as you exit the car park from the current townhouse, showing the visibility from the road. So Highways have raised no objections to the proposals. However, they recommend a construction traffic management plan to protect amenity during the build process. Ecology officers raised no objections and have welcomed the biodiversity net gain provided by hedging and improved landscaping as part of the application. As the application involves 2 dwellings in line with the affordable SPG, the proposals are exempt from an on-site contribution. However, they do require a commuted sum, which is calculated as 8,775 per dwelling, a total of 17,550 to be secured through Section 106. So in conclusion, it's considered that the construction of 2 dwellings on the site is in line with the relevant policies, and given their scale, design and siting, the proposals do not cause unacceptable harm to any existing amenity or the existing character of the area, historic or landscape, or the existing road network. In addition, and importantly, the development of the land will not preclude the commercial operation of the existing townhouse as a public house. Therefore, the proposals are recommended for approval subject to the conditions set out in the officer's report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amy. Before I continue, I was very remiss to be not well welcome our new member to the Planning Committee, Councillor Paul Jordan, who's had training, and I'm hoping he will be very enthusiastic and enjoy being a member of this committee. So welcome, Paul. Sorry about that.
Thank you very much.
Right, welcome on board. I believe Craig has a statement to read out.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair.
Right, go ahead, Craig.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to introduce myself, I am Craig O'Connor, Head of Planning here in Monmouthshire County Council. I've two statements here to read out in relation to the planning application, two statements from public speaking. One statement is from Shire Newton Community Council, and the second statement is a statement of reply from the applicant's agent. So this is the correspondence that was received from Shire Newton Community Council. Shire Newton Community Council has the following objections to this application. The proposed houses are large 4-bedroom dwellings, commanding a price unaffordable by local inhabitants. Our community cannot thrive without its younger members and families, and the proposed dwellings work against this. Whilst we appreciate the Section 106 payment towards affordable housing, the sums involved are way too small to permit any significant affordable housing provision. Whilst we accept that the townhouse site, still not trading as a pub, is an eyesore, it lies in the historic centre of the village, and any partial redevelopment impacts on both the conservation area and the amenity offered by the pub. There would be no outside seating, no children's play area at the pub, and the two large executive houses standing prominently next to the highway will be wholly out of character. The existing on the boundary with the highway should be retained in the present appearance and size to maintain the rural outlook. Many of our residents live outside the village itself and travel in by car. The highways around the pub are narrow and offer no on-street parking. Curtailing the available parking will result in obstruction for the immediate neighbours. The parking spaces for the two dwellings are accessed through the pub car park. Insufficient consideration has been given for the dwelling occupiers and visitors to turn to exit their parking, and the layout is such that they are prone to being blocked in. And that concludes the statement from Shire Newton Community Council. The next statement from public speaking is from the applicant's agent. This is a statement from Mr. Richard Ball, architect. He outlines, I note the planner in her report has gone through the many issues raised by this application and considered them all to have been resolved to her satisfaction. I have discussed this with my client and he has resolved to take the application to appeal should it be refused. This application does not take any farmland, it uses secondary land and is therefore in line with current government thinking on housing supply and should be supported. And that concludes the statement from the applicant's agent. So that's all the public speaking, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you very much, Craig, and thank you, Amy, for your very detailed report also. I believe this is obviously in Councillor Louise Brown's ward. I don't know whether you want to start making a statement or observations, Councillor Brown, or do you want the committee to discuss it first?
Yes, please. I'd like to start with a statement, if that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
The application is for two large 4-bedroom houses in townhouse pub car park and outdoor play area. The main planning policy for the loss of a community facility is LDP policy CRF1. The pub occupies an important historical site in the village. In 1705, a tanner occupied the site and presumably used it as a tannery. Policy CRF1 is quoted on page 15 of the report. It could reasonably become financially viable, and particularly attractive is the outdoor play area, making it a facility as a family pub, and obviously we've all valued outdoor areas due to COVID and being able to sit outside. The policy also says to change part of the facility will not be permitted if it would prejudice the long-term retention of the remainder. It will take away both the outdoor area of this pub and also it'll take away valuable parking spaces. There is currently no pub open in Shire Newton Village, as the Tredegar Arms, the other pub, is to let, but it has an outside area with a separate car park with 20 spaces. This development will result in only 15 spaces for the car park, as 6 spaces will be taken by the houses. The spaces for the houses could well be blocked and difficult to operate if it became a pub again. Just to make a comparison, the recent application in Mountain Brook Lodge, formerly a pub, had about 30 spaces. So they all have more parking spaces as operating pubs. In terms of the highway area roundabout, Spout Hill is not suitable for parking. It's on a corner, and also Tanhouse Court would any off parking as a result of a pub operation would block that if the parking spaces are restricted. There's been no marketing exercise undertaken as expected for policy CRF1 to advertise as a pub with an outdoor space or any attempts at improving it to make it a viable commercial option. It would be more sensible to have the planning application for the site as a whole. It is disingenuous to subdivide the site to avoid policy CRF1. For example, the application for the Chepstow pub near the castle included the main pub building as well. The report links in the affordable housing policy. Policy S4 says that the development site with a capacity for 3 or more dwellings will make provision for at least 60% of the total number of dwellings on sites to be affordable. It goes on to say later on in the policy that affordable housing should be provided on an on-site basis unless exceptional circumstances. It also refers to main villages in C1, and it says for main villages there is a specific issue of affordable housing in rural areas due to limited abilities of existing residents in the countryside, particularly young people, to afford housing which restricts their ability to remain within existing communities. In terms of infill sites, it then goes on to say that 35% of the housing should be affordable. If the site has the capacity for 2 large 4-bedroom houses, it surely has the capacity for 3 smaller houses or bungalows, one of which could be affordable under this policy. 17,000 in financial contribution is nothing like the 200 to 250k required for the market value of one on-site property. Hence, I would ask the committee to consider rejecting the application on the grounds of being contrary to policies S1, SAH 11 of the LDP and supplementary affordable housing policy provision and contrary to policy CRF1. However, if the committee is minded to accept these, then I would request that there will be a variation of the conditions. The exterior of the buildings to have soft render and hopefully painted yellow, so that it would be more in keeping with the bungalow next door to it and also the house we saw in the photographs opposite. And that would actually vary the conditions for and the plans to do so. Also, I would request that there would be a restriction on permitted development rights because of the possibility of unsightly outbuildings close to a historical building because there's no garages for these properties. I'm also concerned about the height being 8.2 metres, as we could see from the photographs that there is a bank up by the fence, and so the height of the land is higher than the height opposite, and would thereby the scale of the buildings is probably too great and wouldn't conform with policy DES 1. And I think the other concern is about the Juliet balcony, because obviously if the properties are higher and there's overlooking as a result of the Juliet balcony. So I would like to speak again prior to the vote on this matter, and we'll listen to what the committee says on it. And I hope I've covered most of the points there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for your input, Councillor Brown, as the local member. I have no hands at the moment other than those referring to the problems we had earlier. So could I have a show of hands if you wish to speak, please, in the chat bar?
My hand has been up, Chair.
Right, thank you, Councillor Murphy. I'll take you then first, please.
Okay, thank you. I completely agree with what Councillor Bowner said about the colour of the properties, but that's about as far as it goes on that. I can't see any reason to reject these properties as such, particularly as they bear such a resemblance to the ones across the road. But I think Councillor Bell's right. If they were painted the same colour, at least there would be some consistency there. I don't buy the argument over the lane. If it was a pub, again, and who knows, but we can't speculate. The townhouse is not in front of us today. If it was a pub again, there would be far more vehicle movement than there would be out of two private houses. So on the basis of that, Chair, I can't see any reason to reject the application. There was a point made that there was no pub left in the centre of Shanewton. I understand that the Tredegar Arms has now been let. So hopefully that information is correct and the pub will reopen. But there are two other pubs within the Shanewton area. So it isn't as if it was the only pub there. This place has not been open for the last 10 years, so I think you can pretty well forget it as a pub anyway. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. I believe yellow is rather a strong colour. I think it tends to be more a deep cream, as I was saying. Yes.
To match the adjoining properties, should we say?
Yes, I think that would be a good description. Thank you, Councillor Murphy. I believe, and we haven't got hands as like we usually got. I believe we have now Councillor Jordan. Do you wish to speak next?
I haven't actually put my I haven't put my hand up, but certainly looking at
it's being confused with what we had problems with before. Yeah. There's not necessarily just yellow hands showing up. So
just, if I can just continue.
Yes, you may do.
Looking at the density of the dwellings immediately in front of the former public house, these properties don't look out of place, and I'd agree with the comments made by Councillor Murphy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jordan. Councillor Roger Harris, then Councillor Alan Davis, please.
Chair, I think Alan got to sticking his hand up before me, so if he'd like to go next.
Yes, you may do. Councillor Alan Davis next, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I can see no reason at all not to accept this application. I'm colourblind myself, so I don't really mind what colour it is. But I think it's we should be looking for it to blend in with the other properties, so I accept that. But based on what our officer has said, I can see absolutely no reason why we would reject this proposal. And if we did, it would go to appeal and be approved anyway. So I would like to move approval, please, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Harris, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, it's all been said now, basically. But if I remember rightly, going back to Shanewton or Minniff Park about 10 years ago, the fuss we had trying to get two affordable houses built there was unbelievable, but it's always the case in the open countryside. So it's good to hear that the Community Council is worried about the fact that there's not enough affordable housing in the area. So we hope for future good vibes from them. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Anybody else now wish to speak?
Yeah, my hand was partly up. I don't know what's happened, Chair. Councillor
Eason next in, please, then Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. This pub was closed quite a long time ago, and going back about 7-8 years, an application was considered to put 3 properties there, 3 smaller stone type properties to blend in with the pub, which would not be a pub, would be a home. Now we see that was withdrawn, and we got an application of 2 larger houses, 4-bedroom houses. It's questionable whether it's too densely packed or not. But the 17,000 pounds of 106 money, I don't think is sufficient for the area of Shanute if you want to put affordable houses there. The question I'm wondering is, where will we be should the pub not open, which I don't think it will do, as to what would happen to the pub in terms of development there, because you're then restricting the ability to make something out of the pub. I think it will finish up as a home eventually. It won't be a pub. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Easton. Councillor Clark?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not unhappy about the elevational details generally, but if you look at them, they've got sills on all the windows, but on the windows which are not up against the gutters, they've got no heads. And I think the property would look a lot better if we had heads over the windows, which would match the properties opposite, which are on Amy's presentation.
That's all you wish to say, Councillor Clark?
Yes, thank you very much.
Right, thank you. Yes, and my issue is always with there's not a closed porch to put things in. When you're living in the countryside, you tend to have a need for dirty overalls and Wellingtons and so on. Otherwise, you're walking straight into the kitchen. But that's what I find is more serviceable in a home in the countryside. I think, is there anyone else now who wishes to speak? I was there yesterday, so I know the site reasonably well before that. And at the moment, to me, the observation was it's just a dumping ground for broken down vehicles and cars, which are very unsightly to me in the middle of a nice village like Shanewton. But if there's nobody else wishing to speak, I believe Councillor Brown wishes to make another statement. Thank you. Amy, do you wish to speak first?
I was just going to reply to some other points that Councillor Brown kindly raised, but I can do that after the second summing up, whichever's easiest. Might be easier secondly.
Yeah, right. Councillor Brown then first, please.
Yes, thank you. I think the point I made about the matching the colours of the existing buildings, the buildings to the eastern side of it are, you know, of very good quality materials. So I'd want to ensure the same sort of thing. And I asked for soft render as opposed to rough render, because if you look at the plans, it refers to rough render on it. So I'd like that amendment. The other point I made was about permitted development rights, because of the fact it is in next to a historical building and there are likely to be outbuildings. It's just really to check on what sort of outbuildings they're going to be. So I would like those removed just so that they can be checked because of the historical nature of the site. I think the other thing is I'm disappointed that the committee isn't considering the affordable housing policy, as there is room within that site for 3 smaller dwellings, and one of those could be affordable. And basically the eastern side of the site has had some affordable housing, so it would actually be manageable by a housing association if a registered social landlord, if the committee wanted to go that way. So I'm disappointed that the committee hasn't taken account of that particular point. Obviously the move has been for approval, and my recommendation would be refusal on the grounds of the affordable housing policy. So I'm somewhat disappointed about the committee's response on that particular aspect. But if it does go for approval, then I would like those conditions added. The soft render, I think the point that Councillor Clark made so that it matched the building opposite as well, and also about the permitted development rights.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Harris, and then I'll ask Amy to come back in. Councillor Harris, please.
Thank you, Chair. What Councillor Brown keeps asking us to do, basically, when she speaks, is to rewrite the planning application that we have before us. You know, that's what we're looking at today. what is on the agenda and whether or not we agree with it. I don't think it's right that the members should keep coming in with alternatives that haven't been discussed, A, with the officers, or B, with the applicant. You know, soft render, maybe what's the difference between that and not soft render? And maybe the applicant doesn't want to put soft render on, or whatever it is. I think we should stick to what we're actually given and not be confused when it comes round to the actual committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Clark, I believe you want to come in before Amy. You're muted, Councillor Clark.
Sorry, Chairman. As you know, we've had considerable problems in this county with render, and I think it might be sensible if the render specification comes to the delegated panel if this application is to go through this afternoon. Because personally, I would recommend it is standard cement render with a decorated surface to the colour that's been put forward. But if we have through render of any description, we could end up in a real problem, because if that render is coloured to the colour we want and then it goes wrong, we are in real trouble. So perhaps we could have the specification of the render, if it's approved, to come to the delegated panel.
Right, thank you very much, Councillor Clark. Amy, and then I'll go to the vote. First of all, on it coming to committee for the colour, and then we'll take a vote on the application. Thank you. Amy?
Thank you. I'll try and be quite succinct with the answers. There's quite a few things that have been raised here. So firstly, I think we're right. We need to remember that the application before us is for 2 dwellings on this area of land that is part of the curtilage of the townhouse and not for the conversion of the townhouse. So whilst the loss of the play area isn't great, it doesn't preclude the use of the pub to operate as a pub restaurant facility. There is enough external space for that to happen. The pub has also been closed for quite considerable time. I've been told around about 10 years. So I think we need to take that into consideration when we're looking at the viability of the pub. There are also other pubs in the area, other facilities available. So we don't, if we followed the policy, we don't necessarily need to go down the full route of marketing. The issue on parking was raised as well, in how the parking for the dwellings will be separated from that of the pub should it operate again. There is a condition, I think it is condition 9, that addresses that and asks for further details of how those residential parking spaces will be protected. In relation to affordable housing, there's a comment relating to the capacity of the site. The application before us is for 2 dwellings, and officers are consider that the site can take 2 dwellings. Those dwellings are of a size and a scale and a mass and design that are appropriate within that context and are very similar to those immediately adjacent to it. So they sit appropriately within their scale and format. Those 2 dwellings there are under the threshold, and therefore the commuted sum is in line with the affordable housing policy, and therefore there's no deviation from those 2 policies. In relation to the colour, condition 3 does ask for samples of all the proposed external finishes. We can amend that to specifically include colour. And given its context within the conservation area, could I suggest that we consult Heritage specifically on discharging that condition, so that the Heritage officers can give advice in relation to whether the render type and colour is appropriate in the conservation area. And we also take on board the comments over the headers over the windows. There's also been mentioned in relation to what would happen to the pub in the future. Any change of use or proposals for that pub to not operate as a pub would have to come in as a separate application and will be considered in accordance with that application and all the material considerations that will relate to that. Thank you.
Well, Amy, thank you very much. I think you've covered all those points very well, all those concerns that were raised specifically by Councillor Brown. And as you said, as the colour will be discussed with Heritage, I don't think it's necessary then for us to bring it back to the delegated panel, really, as it's obviously going to be observed by the Heritage. I will take you quickly now, Councillor Brown, as really you've had the opportunity twice to speak. Thank you.
So, sorry, can I speak again, Chair?
Yes, I just said you can now, but
okay, thank you. Yeah, I didn't get any answer on the removal of permitted development rights and outbuildings and so forth. And also, I think there's a comment from Councillor Giles in the chat bar about permitted development rights. So if the officers could cover that particular point as well, I'd be grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. So, Amy, would you like to comment on those two issues now by Councillor Brown?
It's my camera. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so at the moment, there is no proposals to remove permitted development rights on the application. I think there are concerns in relation to the fact that it's in the conservation area. Is that in relation to archaeology specifically?
Councillor Brown?
I'm wondering the justification for removing the permitted development rights.
Well, I think it's because there's no garages, and obviously, so there's no storage area for garages. There's only parking spaces, and also because of the it's close to the conservation area and the historic nature of Tanhouse pub itself. So it was really sort of the historical context as well, because obviously, I mean, outbuildings may be fine. It's just to remove the permitted development rights so that you don't get unsightly outbuildings. That was the only reason. And I think there was a comment in the chat bar from Councillor Giles on another matter which says, are you going to remove permitted development rights for the external finishes? Otherwise, the condition wouldn't work. So if you could answer that, thank you.
Thank you very much, Amy.
So yes, thank you for that. In terms of the materials, yes, we can remove permitted development rights for the change of external materials. In relation to outbuildings, there are limitations on what the permitted development rights are on the property, given the fact that it's in the conservation area. So I think that could happen. It's up to members whether they want to fully remove all the permitted development rights from the site or not. I think there's a limited justification for that, but it's up to committee to decide.
Right, thank you very much indeed, Amy. So, Councillor Brown, do you wish to move for approval now, as you're the local member, with those conditions that Amy has explained fully?
I think I don't think I would move for approval on this particular application because of the concerns with regard to affordable housing, that that 3 dwellings could go on there rather than 2, and one of them could be affordable. So
Chair, I moved approval some time ago.
I think somebody else has moved approval. So
yes,
I think
as a local member, I thought it was just.
But I would like to also, if it does, I would like to make sure that the vote for approval does include the conditions that we've discussed.
Well, that's what I just said.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Alan Davis. I believe you moved for approval with all that we've discussed fully with the committee.
Chair, I'll second it.
And that is seconded by Councillor David Evans. Could I have a show of hands for approval, please?
Sorry, Chair. Could we just confirm what those conditions are that we're voting on? Because I think the original sorry, my mind's gone blank now. The original motion was proposed quite some time ago, before all of that discussion. So I'm not certain that it was with all of those conditions, and so maybe perhaps we could just clarify what we're voting on.
I think we are voting on all those that were raised later, Denzel, because Councillor Davis again said, I have put for approval, so I'm thinking he took on board exactly all those conditions. Is that correct, Councillor Davis?
Yes, that's correct, Madam Chairman. Except the permitted development rights, I'm quite happy with the application as it was originally submitted.
Right, thank you. But as we've agreed now, those conditions, are you happy now to still move it with all those conditions that we've been talking about?
Could we just clarify what those are? I think for the officers who are going to have to draft this afterwards, if we could just have a list of what those are, that would be great.
Amy, I think you'd be best in the position to do that.
Madam Chair, do you want me to just clarify the conditions?
Yes, please, Craig, as long as somebody does, then we know exactly then what we are voting on. Thank you, Craig.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we've got conditions relating to the removal of PD rights for materials as outlined by Councillor Howard in the chat and confirmed in conversation, so that would be removed. So materials will be checked by the conservation officer and also be viewed by the delegated panel in terms of the render. And then we will have a condition to remove PD rights for external finishes to keep that in perpetuity. I think as officers, we don't feel that the permitted development rights for outbuildings is necessary. So I would suggest taking a vote without that condition at this stage. And I don't think there was any other additional conditions apart from that. So the main conditions are the render and the materials. So they will be confirmed, and the removal of the PD rights for external finishes in the long term.
Does the material include the colour as well?
Yes, we will have control over that as well.
Right, everybody clear on that now? And it's been moved for approval with all those that Craig has summarised now.
So sorry, Chair, just for clarity, I think if somebody could again move for approval and second after Craig's now clarified it, and then we'll have a fresh.
Yes, and Councillor Davis, are you happy to move that as it's been explained now up to date?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm very happy to move it as it's been explained by Craig with those conditions that Craig has outlined. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Davis. You have a seconder, I believe, in Councillor David Evans. Was that you, Councillor?
That's correct, Chair.
Right, now I will go to the vote as we've just explained, for approval or against or abstain, and it's in the chat bar. Please vote.
If members could just wait for the new vote to appear, I think the existing vote is still up there, and then I'll let the members know when the new vote has been put in the chat bar. So just to avoid people double voting. I can't see the new vote in the chat bar yet.
In the centre of my screen, it is just got approval, against approval, and abstain and submit. Everybody else clear on that? Nothing else there at all?
I haven't got it at all, Chair. Oh, it's there now.
It's just appeared. If members could vote using the new form that's just appeared. Right, I've now had 14 responses. I believe we have 15 members logged on, but we've had 12 for approval, 1 against approval, and 1 abstained. So I'm quite happy to confirm that that's been approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Denzel. So we now go on to the next application, and I don't know, I'm not sure who is presenting this afternoon. Is it you, Phil? Or Andrew?
Yes, it's me today, Chair.
Right, thank you, Phil. If you'd introduce yourself, please.
Yep, I'll just get the presentation up and introduce myself. Yes, it's up there. Okay, that's right. Try again. My Presentation has disappeared. Bear with me a moment. Here we go. I found it again.
Looks like we've still got the townhouse there, Phil.
Right, yeah, just going down the list now. Bear with me. Bit of a delay on this. There we go. Right. My name is Philip Thomas. I'm Development Services Manager with Monmouthshire County Council. I'm presenting this application DM 2020-00390. This is a change of use of an existing agricultural building to a B1 use at Guyafloyd Farm, New Church Chepstow. This is a site that some of the members have been to in the past when we looked at a residential conversion here. It's near the Guyafloyd crossroads, about 100 metres off the B road there. The site is located in open countryside, approximately 100 metres, as I say, north of the Guyafloyd crossroads. The building, the subject of this application, has a steel frame and measures approximately 26 metres by 18.5 metres. It's finished in concrete blockwork, Yorkshire boarding, galvanised steel, which I'll show you in a moment. The pitch roof is a fibre cement sheeting with translucent roof lights and is 6.5 metres high to the ridge. The building was previously used as a cattle shed and for farm storage. So, as you can see in that slide there, the access is indicated in a little red text box off the rural lane there near the crossroads. And there's a group of farm buildings. It's the one to the top sort of right hand corner there, the sort of square shaped building, which is the one in the aerial photograph you can see there in that group of 3 buildings. Yeah, that shows a little bit better. It's the red edged building there. There's a building to the left, which is sort of more linear rectangular building, which was approved for residential conversion a number of years ago, but hasn't been implemented. And there's another farm building to the south of it. I'll carry on a moment. That's the building as existing, typical farm building, as said, with those materials I just mentioned. And these are the elevations proposed. So roof covering to remain as existing. There'd be additional concrete blockwork, and there'll be some inserted traditional sort of industrial openings on the front elevation with personnel doors fitted into those openings and personnel doors at the rear to lead onto the car park. Access will be around the side. So it'll be subdivided into 3 separate B1 units with parking, as said, and access around the rear of the building for personnel. And that's the car park plan. So it'll be 19 spaces and a welfare cabin with loos at the rear. That's the building at present. So it'll all be replaced, that elevation there with the larger doors on that elevation. That's an internal shot. The land to the rear where the car parking would go, and there'd be a new hedge to screen the parking area planted along there. And then that's the building to the left, the timber building, was the residential conversion approved several years ago. The greenish sort of building in the background there is the application site, application building, and then there's another farm building over to the right hand side. It's a typical fairly utilitarian farmyard, and then that's where the access will be around the parking area at the rear. So that's a summary of the main issues. So the current application seeks, as I said, the conversion of that modern building into farm building into B1 units, which are made up of offices, research and development, studios and high tech and light industry. This is a speculative proposal with no end user identified at this stage. The proposal involves enclosing the open south elevation with blockwork and steel sheeting to match the existing, and the 3 roller shutter doors I mentioned would be inserted on the front elevation, and 3 personnel doors would be inserted into the rear. And to the rear of the building is proposed to have that 19 space car parking area for customers' employees. and a new hedge would be planted around the car parking area. A welfare cabin would be provided within the car park, and this would provide toilet and kitchen facilities for all the units. I'll just go back to that slide which showed the layout of that. There we go. The welfare building would measure 2.3 by 3.5 metres. Planning Policy Wales 11, the latest edition, supports economic growth, but also recognises the need to protect the character of local areas. It also promotes the use of previously developed land. This development would conform to those objectives by providing employment opportunities in a rural area on a previously developed site. PPW 11 supports activities that generate sustainable long-term prosperity, jobs and income. The site is located outside of any development boundary within open countryside. Planning Policy Wales Edition 11 and TAN 6, Technical Advice Note 6, which is Planning for Sustainable Communities, support the diversification of the rural economy to meet the needs of both traditional and new industries, while minimising the impacts on local communities and the environment. Paragraphs in Chapter 5 of the LDP recognise the need to balance rural enterprise with the principles of sustainable development, and priority is given to the reuse or adaptation of existing buildings, with conversion to employment uses being promoted. The building in question is of modern construction, but was used for its intended purpose as an agricultural building in association with this farm for many years until it became redundant. The criteria in LDP policy RE2 are complied with in this case, and the proposal would be an acceptable form of employment development in the countryside. It would comply with policies S10 and RE2 of the LDP, which seeks to support the county's rural economy by enabling the provision of rural enterprise and permit the conversion of buildings in the countryside to employment use where appropriate. In terms of sustainability, the site is, as said, in open countryside and does not occupy a highly sustainable location in relative terms. Employees working in the offices would tend to drive to the site. But having said that, it is close to the main secondary road from us to Chepstow, which does accommodate a local bus service, the number 63 Cumbrawn to Chepstow route. In county terms, there are limited opportunities to accommodate employment growth in rural areas, and this site, at least being close to the main road network, does offer a choice of transport modes, and in this regard is a reasonable option for this form of development compared to other sites in deeper countryside locations. In terms of visual impact, the new cladding would match the existing in colour and profile. The fair-faced concrete blockwork would be retained. The south elevation of the building would be the most significantly altered with the introduction of new door openings, but these would be in keeping with the appearance of the existing building with dark grey roller shutter doors. The proposed car park would be to the rear of the building in an area that is already hard surfaced. It is proposed to be screened from wider views, as said, by that native species hedgerow, and that is considered acceptable. Generally, the conversion will not affect natural views and panoramas within the wider landscape, and the views from the neighbouring scheduled ancient monument of Lloyd burial chamber in particular. Cadw concurs and considers that it's unlikely that the change of use will alter the way the monument is experienced, and there will not be an impact on the setting of a scheduled ancient monument. In respect of the impact on neighbour amenity, which has been raised as concern by Community Council, use class B1 is a use that, and I'll quote, in all cases is a use which can be carried out in any residential area without detriment to the amenity of that area by reason of noise, vibration, smell, fumes, smoke, soot, ash, dust or grit. Close quote. The proposed use is not considered to have an adverse impact on any existing neighbouring properties or any approved but not yet implemented. However, to limit noise and activity around the site, there is a condition recommended restricting operating hours, given the close proximity to potential residential properties. The existing access is wide with good visibility in both directions. The access is located some 75 metres north of the B4235 at the Lloyd crossroads. The Highway Authority has no objection to the principle of the change of use. The footprint of the proposed development is such that the likely traffic movements generated by the change of use would not be considered to be detrimental to the existing network or lead to deterioration in highway safety, and parking would be compliant with the adopted council guidance. So to conclude, Planning Policy Wales 11 states that a strong rural economy is essential to support sustainable and vibrant rural communities. The establishment of new enterprises and the expansion of existing businesses are crucial to the growth and stability of rural areas. And therefore, the advice in PPW 11 is that the establishment of new enterprises in rural areas is to be encouraged because it would increase local prosperity. So we'd recommend approval. We should note that there is a need to adapt proposed condition 9 to include the need to provide 2 electric vehicle charging points to comply with the advice in Future Wales, Policy 12 that is in Future Wales, as also identified by Monmouthshire County Council Highways team. So we'd recommend approval, as said, with that amended condition. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Phil. I mean, you're not Welsh speaking, neither am I, but I believe it is pronounced Gathllwyd.
Oh, right. Well,
if anybody members are Welsh speaking, perhaps they could correct me on that, but that's how people around there tend to pronounce it, as Gathllwyd. Anyway, that's a minor.
I did a bit of Welsh, Ruth, and it is Gathllwyd.
Yes, yeah. Anyway, well, as it looks and you sound it out is very often different to how it's pronounced. Anyway, thank you for that. I believe this is again for, I believe, Craig to make a statement again. Thank you. Thank you, Phil.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. There is public speaking with this application as well. So
thank you.
The first set of public speaking I have is from Shire Newton Community Council.
Okay.
Shire Newton Community Council strongly objects to this application. Our response is dated 8th of June 2020 and 14th of April 2021, as summarised in the Planning Officer's report, so we won't restate them here. Planning Policy Wales 11, Monmouthshire County Council's comments in the local LPD on policy RE2 and RE2 itself all acknowledge that development is not at any cost to the environment. Development must be carefully controlled and a balance is required to protect the character and appearance of the surrounding area. Whilst the shell of the building is largely retained, this application would be the first B1 site in this deeply rural countryside, industrialising a nature-driven farming area. Tourists and residents alike highly value our landscape and environment. Goheled Farmhouse, if I pronounce that correctly. Gathllwyd. Thank you very much. Now a private residence is close by Chapel Cottage, is across the B4235. The barn conversion directly opposite the site is currently being rebuilt for residential occupation. The adjacent milking parlour has consent for conversion to a dwelling, and Glenmore, another residence, is barely 100 metres from the site, all of which would be directly affected by any increase in activity. There are 19 parking spaces, suggesting around 38 vehicle movements per day, plus deliveries and collections, all impacting on our residents. Access past the building is unsatisfactory, as the marked loading bays will inevitably obstruct access to the car park, with consequential difficulties for emergency vehicles. Whilst the planning report envisages unobtrusive offices, the environmental officer reminds us that the definition of Class B1 includes research and development of products or processes, and any industrial process being a use which can be carried out in any residential area without detriment to the amenity of that area by reason of noise, vibration, smell, fumes, smoke, soot, ash, dust or grit. We are further concerned that Wales may follow England in combining B1 in a new Class E with retail goods, financial and professional services. We note this is a speculative development with no specific end user in mind. The internal layout of the building is unsuitable for offices, lacking heating and insulation, with a ceiling height to the roof ridge of 6.46 metres. The shutter doors are 2.9 metres high, permitting the movement of large plant and machinery. Where council is minded to grant consent, we would request stricter limitations on the operating hours, particularly to exclude use at weekends and bank holidays, and the operation of any plant, process or machinery outside working times, and an Article 4 direction confining use B1A as free offices. If a farmer applied under RE3, a business case would have to be submitted showing the viability of the proposed use. Given the COVID consequence for home work, and particularly for office workers, the need for offices and local workers is greatly reduced. We do not accept B1 use would bring any advantage in local prosperity, only detriment for our residents and the rural characteristic. Where council is minded to grant consent, we would request a limit of 3 years to demonstrate otherwise the viability of the proposal and benefit to the community. That concludes the statement that's been requested for Shire Newton Community Council. Madam Chair, I now have public speaking from Stephen Williams, who is the applicant's agent. So if I just share this video recording with members. Can members please let me know when they can see the gentleman for public speaking?
Yes, I can.
Yes, no problem.
I can see it.
Brilliant. I'm just going to press play then. This is Stephen Williams, the applicant's agent. Thank you, members.
Good afternoon. My name is Steve Williams, Williams Associates, agent for the planning application DM 2020-00390. Firstly, I'd like to thank the planning committee for the opportunity to give a very brief outline of the proposals at Clwyd Farm. Further to the rather negative feedback received from the consultation from the councillor for Shire Newton Ward, I'm not going to deal with all of the points raised in her various emails, but will summarise the situation as best I can. The existing use of the farm at Clwyd is mainly agricultural at present, and there are a number of large agricultural buildings which are coming to the end of their usable life in terms of agricultural, and therefore the applicant has considered that it may be an opportunity to change the use of these buildings for a different purpose, and in this case to a light industrial use. The area at Clwyd is the buildings are part of an existing range of agricultural buildings, and the buildings in particular are outlined in a red line, which includes the car parking area to the rear. So to be absolutely clear, the existing agricultural building will be kept in its current form. Everything about it will be retained, and the only changes will be that the south-facing aspect of the building will have roller shutter doors attached to them in order to secure the various units. The car parking area is again existing. It's hard standing at the rear of the buildings, to the north of the buildings, and these will be retained, and no plan is in place to change the material. The planning application and proposal brings benefits to the local environment in that a new hedgerow will be planted along the bank at the north and eastern side of the development. This will be integrated into the existing hedgeline, therefore providing increased biodiversity. There will also be bat boxes and sparrow boxes attached to the side of the agricultural building, which will further enhance the biodiversity and environmental benefits that the application brings. To talk about the application briefly, the application being brought about in order to enhance local employment. A scheme of this nature will potentially provide employment for local people whereby they can use their skills in the local area without having to travel large distances. So in summary, the scheme is, I believe, well thought out. It adds environmental and biodiversity enhancement to the local area whilst making use of an existing agricultural building without fundamentally changing the fabric of the building and providing employment opportunities in the local area. Thank you very much.
That concludes the public speaking, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Craig. You can't very often thank those who have put in a video, because obviously it is just a video for us to be shown into committee. This again is in Councillor Louise Brown's ward. So do you wish to speak first of all now, Before committee, Councillor Brown.
Yes, please, Chair. I am concerned that the application isn't entirely ready for committee. There is no full site layout plan covering the development, despite the planning officer urging the applicants to improve the plans. Planning permission is granted on the basis of approved plans, and once planning permission is obtained, the site may be developed by anyone, not just the applicant. You can compare this with the previous application where there was a full site plan showing the whole operation of the site. Policy R4G on conversion of buildings states that there should be checked to make sure they're suitable for conversion before consent is granted. There is no structural report, despite the comment by MCC Ecology of the poor state of the building. And these was one of the comments that I made. It is a purely speculative application as there is no end user in mind. Monmouthshire Highways comment that the proposal is located in what can be considered an unsustainable location in Monmouthshire. It is described by the Community Council as deeply rural, as in Newchurch, not Earlswood, and a remote location away from any settlements. Highways also comment that the level of detail submitted in support of the application is not considered adequate to provide constructive highway comments. The first time I knew a car park was being dug out at the back was when I received the photos for the planning committee. How will that stop operating as a pond, as there are no details of the surface used, slope or drainage under suds? Any underground pipe will not cover this new area. There are 3 agricultural buildings on site, a milking parlour with permission to be converted to residential use. The application was granted on the basis that the same site was unsuitable for business use due to poor broadband and better location of offices in Chepstow. The situation is no different today, and it's very unclear what the derelict agricultural building opposite will be used for and how that will integrate to the rest of the site. It is a speculative use with no end user, and would suggest that, in view of all of these concerns, that the application should be considered for deferral at this stage. If you are minded to approve the application, then on page 34 of the report, officer's report, it states that it is only suitable to be restricted and mentions officers there and should be a B1 in brackets A use only, as it is 3 metres from the milking parlour that has residential consent. So in other words, residences, there is a residence potentially very close. You've already dealt with the condition on charging points being added to that, but the other conditions that are recommended is that the operation of any plant or machinery are within the hours of use that are put forward, that there should be no weekends or bank holidays, and the suggestion is a 3-year consent in view of to test the viability of it and the fact that it is speculative use only. There would be a necessity for a structural report, and the car park should really have some sort of hard surface and drainage, otherwise I can see the water just floating down there and it not being used as an actual car park. And there needs to also be an approved layout plan, and I would like to speak prior to the vote, and hope that all of these points will be fully considered by this planning committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I'm sure Craig or Phil will be able to enlighten us on that, on what you list as B1 use. And also, with my recollection, it is quite a few years ago that the building the milking parlour referred to was approved for residential, and that was long before we had charging points and COVID and people wanting to move out of a built-up area to, you know, work like a lot are working from home now, in an area where they don't have to travel so far, travel to Bristol or so on, or even London from around here. So I think the whole ball game of what was approved with the residential is very different to what is there now today. And could someone tell me, please, is there an acreage of land with this to make it a viable farm? Because to me, I wouldn't have thought so, because it doesn't look as if there's been stock in those sheds for a good many years. Can you highlight any of those, please, Phil, especially the B use? Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Chair. I don't know how much farmland is left for this. I haven't been briefed on that, but obviously this is to change the use of this farm buildings to industrial, so that's what's before us. In terms of some of the points that Councillor Brown made, I'll just go through them in the order they were made. In terms of the plans and layout, the plans that have been submitted are sufficient for the application to be validly made and determined. They are legible. They're sufficient for determination. There is a condition about, there is a plan which I showed you. I'll go back to the presentation, which showed the layout of the car park. So yeah. That showed that. The rest of the site is shown in the other plans. So bear with me a moment. There's a site plan here. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yeah, so that shows that particular extent of the site. There's obviously elevational details. There's another plan in that slide there. There's proposed elevations. Floor plans, so those are all sufficient for us to determine the application. There is a condition, and that's the one that I've suggested is amended to include the electrical charging points, to ask for a full detailed car parking layout, so we can add that in. But ultimately, this is sufficient for us to determine the application in terms of the quality of drawings submitted. So you know, I hope I've explained that that particular element. In terms of the site not being accessible to issues like broadband, that can be made to work because of the new technologies that are emerging. The council is in itself promoting the sort of micro responses to achieving broadband in the countryside. So there's no reason to not approve a proposal in the countryside because of the limitations on broadband. That's an issue that needs to be tackled for all of us living in Monmouthshire and any rural community. So that can be made to work through increasing use of technology. In terms of the B1 use, the suggestion it should just be limited to offices. Well, the whole point about B1 is whatever use it is, if it's R&D and other forms of industrial process, they're so they're not noisy. That's the definition of B1. So we would suggest that this is an acceptable form of use within the range of B1 uses that are within that use class, including R&D and light industry. It says B1 is a use that in all cases is a use which can be carried out in any residential area without detriment to the amenity of the area by reason of noise, vibration, smell, fumes, smoke, soot, ash, dust or grit. The main concern here is activity with people going back and forth to the car park and traffic. So that's why we've conditioned that it's actually limited to a 6 o'clock, 8 till 6 limit on the hours of opening. And we would suggest that as far as officers is concerned, is a reasonable response to, you know, to protect the amenity of those living near the site. In terms of the other aspects, yes, we covered the electric charging points we're going to amend condition 9. I've covered the working hours issue. In terms of 3 years limit or temporary consent, well, that's going to be a deterrent for anybody investing in this particular proposal in terms of economic development and financial investment. So I don't think that's a particularly reasonable way of looking at these things. We consider the proposal to be acceptable in its own right and should be given a chance to establish itself permanently. And in terms of drainage, then the proposal will need consent from the SAB, the Sustainable Drainage Authority. So that will be covered under that aspect of legislation. So yeah, I hope I've covered those points. Thank you, Chair.
And also, Phil, as far as the service in the car park, presumably that will be a hard surface anyway if you've got vehicles in and out of there, so it wouldn't be muddy in a pool of water. It would all be drained, all connected together.
Yeah, sure. And it was obviously last used as a farm.
Yes.
There would have been all sorts of traffic and vehicles going in and out of that site, which will arguably be bigger than the vehicles that will be accessing this site for light industrial or B1 uses.
Right.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for those explanations, Phil. Councillor Brown?
Yeah, could I just ask, there's been no comment about having a structural report, which is required for usage. And I think the other thing is that it will be helpful to have an informative about, or some condition about, the car park with regard to the drainage and hard surface, because my concern is if that becomes waterlogged, then basically the yard will end up being used for parking rather than the car park. The other question is that there was a concern that if you're going to keep it at B1 use, because the residence is only 3 meters away, then I would suggest that you do add about operating machinery only to be used within the working hours, and obviously the community council has asked for no weekends or bank holidays. So if you could just clarify those particular points as well, please. Thank you.
I think Phil had done most of those, and as for structural, I believe it's made of steel girders and breeze block, which is what most agricultural buildings are these days. And I think when it was mentioned about poor condition, I would have said it was the Yorkshire boarding and perhaps some of the roof. Actually, structurally, I would say when I saw it yesterday, it looked pretty sound. And as for the car park, as we said, it will have a hard surface like any car park, presumably. Is that correct, Phil?
Yes, yeah, it will do. And as I've said, it will be subject to SUD's approval.
Yes.
So it will need to drain properly and take care of itself, so that there's no runoff onto the road, onto the area which would be used by the residential property nearby, or onto the road that leads to the crossroads. So yeah, that will be covered under that legislation.
Yeah. Thank you. Everything all right now, Councillor Brown?
I didn't have any response about the, just because of the concern of it being a wider B1 use, about the operating machinery only being used within the working hours as well.
Well, Phil did mention that in his report.
B1 uses are capable of being carried out without detriment to noise in terms of amenity.
What I'm saying is,
if it isn't a B1 use, then it wouldn't be authorised. It would be unauthorised, and we could take action against it. The whole point of them is they're quiet. So
could I just clarify that the hours of operation would ensure that operating machinery wouldn't be moving at that time either?
Again, you're restricting a business from reasonable use, I would suggest. They may have need to operate the machinery out of beyond those hours. But, what we're doing is effectively putting obstacles in the way of a business being able to operate in a reasonable manner, I would suggest. But ultimately, that's up to members. If they feel that's a reasonable form of condition to apply, that would be a matter for members to decide.
I think it's because it's a very extremely quiet rural location at the moment. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Right, any other members now wish to comment on the application, please?
There are several of us in the
I haven't got any evidence of any hands in the chat bar, Councillor Murphy, so you please go ahead.
Yeah,
then Councillor Davis.
After me, it's Councillor Davis, yeah. We had an application similar to this at Penterry, didn't we, above St Arvan's a little while ago.
Yes, I declared interest on that.
Yeah, it was almost an identical building and in a far more remote location. We must support rural enterprise. We really must. Diversity in rural areas is absolutely essential, and it will be much better with B1 use, which, as Phil keeps saying, is going to be relatively quiet, and my apologies. I did forget to put my camera on, but it's certainly right what Phil says about broadband. All of the objections that I've heard so far relate to historical issues. The resi which has been approved wasn't proceeded with. As far as I'm aware, that's expired now. If that came back to us, we would probably have to turn it down because of the existing conditions on site. So I don't buy that it's going to be disruptive in the countryside. In fact, in my ward, we've got a vehicle repair yard down a very, very narrow lane. And that causes absolutely no problems whatsoever. So I'm quite happy to support this and recommend approval.
Thank you very much indeed. When you refer to Penn Terry, the roads to get in and out are narrow lanes, and it's a far bigger building that they're in the process of doing now at the moment than what this is, quite near to a good network of roads, I would say. Councillor Davis, please. Everyone muted your mic?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I have to say I'm very pleased to see this application because and particularly the type of industry and research and development which is proposing to keep within this building. Because in my opinion, we have a real problem in Monmouthshire with having buildings available for this sort of commercial units to go into. I do understand people's concerns, it's in the countryside, but I think the nature of the businesses that are proposed, the light industry, research and development, are just the sort of things as a county we need to be encouraging. And personally, I'd like to see some more of these sort of developments in the country, well, as long as they are appropriate, you know, for the area that they are in, because we have to encourage new business into Monmouthshire. Research and development is just the sort of thing that we should be encouraging. I understand the concerns that Councillor Brown has had about different things, but once again, I think we are diverting from the actual application that's before us, and most of the questions have been answered anyway. And therefore, I would like to second Councillor Murphy in approving this application. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Well spoken. Anyone else wish to comment, please? Councillor Powell, I believe you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Thank you very much. I'm all for this application. And after all, everybody's so worried about the quiet in the countryside being disturbed. Chairman, you and I both know we've both farmed. We have machinery in the fields. I remember somebody complaining because my daughter, when she worked for a farmer near Abergavenny, had been ploughing all night to catch the weather. And they said to my husband, for goodness sake, tell that girl not to work all night long. But I mean, you know, there is noise in the country besides anything like this. And I think we should encourage anything that's going to provide employment, as long as it's not in a real nuisance. We need employment, and particularly need employment in the country areas. There are people that live in the country areas who are looking for work somewhere near. And I think that we should encourage all these types of things. And so I support it.
Thank you very much. And yes, it is very noisy in the countryside, much do people think it's not. Yesterday morning, our tractors were going through the village at 4:30 yesterday morning to get silage done. So those who thought they'd have a quiet bank holiday weekend, I'm very sorry. I do apologise, but that's the way of what the countryside is really all about. It is not just quiet if it's not tractors and vehicles and lorries that are about all the time and stock making a noise, but that is what the countryside is, and more people wish to move out and live here, and if they can work, so much the better for them. They don't have to travel into cities and towns if their work allows them to do it more locally, which is better for everybody, and pollution and everything. So yes, I think it's a very good use of a building that otherwise is just going to be more and more redundant looking, and then that is an eyesore in the countryside that nobody wants to see. So anybody else wish to comment? I've said my piece, I'm sorry. Anybody else wish to comment? Do you have any other comments to make at all, Phil? You're looking serious on the screen. If not, I shall.
No, certainly not. No,
Right.
I'll turn my camera off.
Thank you, Phil. So, Councillor Brown, do you wish to comment now before I go to the vote, as it has been moved and seconded?
Yeah, I won't support the application because it's a speculative development, and I'd know that the broadband in the area is so bad that it would be unlikely to attract the users of any type of B1 use, and I'm concerned that there hasn't been consideration about putting in the various conditions that have been suggested. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Harris, again, before I go to the vote. Councillor Harris, you're mute. Then Councillor Jordan, you wish to comment also, I believe. Thank you. Councillor Harris first, please.
Still muted?
No, you're fine now, Councillor Harris, I think. No, you're still mute.
I think Councillor Harris is having audio problems.
Right, I'll go to Councillor Jordan then next, and perhaps Councillor Harris can join again.
Thank you, Chair. I think the fact that it may be a speculative development is irrelevant. I think we should be applauding the applicant who's prepared to put his money in trying to encourage rural development and employment in the countryside.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Jordan. Councillor Harris now. No luck. Put your thumb up if you agree with what's been said, please, or if not, the other way. Right, thank you, Councillor Harris. We can use signed language if we can't hear you. Thank you. So I believe now everybody's had chance to speak. So I would now like, I believe it was Councillor Murphy who moved approval, and it was seconded by Councillor Alan Davis. So could we please go to the vote, please? If they can put the vote in the chat bar, please.
We've now had 12 responses, Madam Chair. I believe there are a couple more to vote. 13 responses. Given the IT issues we've had so far today, I think I'll accept 13 as 12 for approval, and we've had 1 against approval, so that's quite clearly passed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. It must be this warm weather interfering with it.
I think so.
Yeah, thank you very much, Denzel. So that application has been approved. So I thank you all very much for supporting me again for another year, and I do thank our officers most sincerely for all their work that they have to do in the background, especially when it comes to technology, and they do support us very well with presentations and everything. I believe Craig wished to come on board, but I believe we've got a meeting now at 5 o'clock also.
Madam Chair, we've just got one appeal to share with members.
Oh yes, I am sorry, we have got an appeal. I would like some, if you could possibly, Craig, give some sort of information about this, because some members of our community council were quite concerned about it.
Yes,
Thank you,
sure.
Craig.
I'll just pass you on to my colleague Andrew. He'll just run through the appeal decision for you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Craig. Hi, Andrew, please introduce yourself.
Yep, good afternoon, Madam Chair, and hopefully you can all see me. So my name is Andrew Jones, Development Management Area Manager, and as is the case, we will just run through this appeal decision. It's just for members' information only. So if you just bear with me one moment. If you can let me know, you can see that.
Yes, I can, thank you.
Okay, so this was an appeal. This was wasn't for a planning application for granting of planning permission. This was for a lawful development certificate, and this was up top end of Abergavenny, Pentre Lane. I believe it's pronounced Cum Just, but after the discussions earlier, I'll perhaps leave my Welsh pronunciation.
Cum Gist.
Cum Gist, thank you. So just a quick summary of the case. So the dwelling there that was subject to this certificate was given permission back in late 1980s with an agricultural occupancy condition attached to it. So what this lawful development certificate application sought was confirmation that the approved dwelling was not actually built in accordance with the plans, and therefore did not have the benefit of planning permission. And as such, given the passage of time, being built more than 4 years ago, that it would seek to establish that it would be immune from enforcement action and therefore lawful. So the result, if successful, would be that the occupancy condition would not be applicable, since the permission would never have been implemented, and that's the permission that contained the agricultural occupancy condition. So the council's position was to refuse the certificate, and say that the case was that it had not been built in accordance. The main differences I've got on screen there. So it's provision of a storeroom on the lower ground level, an external raised terrace as well. So apologies for the quality of the images. These are taken from the late 80s. So this is what consent was originally granted for, subject to the AOC. And the area of contention really is this sort of voided area here, as well as, if you can see my cursor, the sort of terrace on that south elevation. So these are the floor plans today, which you can see the sun terrace there slightly larger, and what would have been the void being used as storage. And that's a photograph there as the building stands in situ, which shows the site there. So a split level almost, it's sort of single story, then 2-story because of the topography. So our case was essentially that the plans weren't materially different, and that the footprint envelope as approved had been built, and that the use of the void as storage wouldn't be development with only the external door added. And whilst the sun terrace was larger than the approved plans, initially, the view was that it couldn't be proven that was done at the same time. But notwithstanding that the differences were such that it wouldn't be so significant to render everything unauthorised. So that was our case. But the inspector took a different view and allowed the appeal, granting the certificate without obviously any conditions. And their view was on the balance of probabilities. The dwelling that is now before us today is exactly how it was built, and therefore not in accordance with those original permission. And that occupancy condition, easy for me to say, obviously doesn't bite accordingly, and that condition is not therefore on the property today, and the certificate was granted. So I know we've had an excellent run of appeal decisions recently. So this isn't a granting of permission or not, it's down to a matter of fact and the balance of probabilities. And I know there, Chair, you mentioned there was some local concern. I say these are very much on each case on its merits, and there's individual circumstances to each case, and there is a specific history with this building here. So it's one of those things. It's a decision that's the inspectors, that they've come to that balance, say testing the probabilities. But I think if there's any local concern that this could be setting something for elsewhere, I say it's very much a building specific with its own unique history that led the inspector to that decision.
But Andrew, they had that permission. I take it was from a new build. It wasn't a conversion.
No, correct. It was when it was originally allowed or given permission in 1986. It was as a new build, correct.
So and of course they wouldn't have had that permission at all without it going through all the rigorous means of an agricultural tie. So correct. I still can't see why that tie shouldn't still have been attached to it.
Yeah, what they've argued effectively is that they had that consent, but what they didn't build that consent, and which would then at that time have been unauthorised. But through the passage of time, that has now become lawful. There was no, I can
understand that, but why is the condition of it being for agricultural not still attached?
Because that was only part of that original application. So this is saying it's unauthorised, therefore without any conditions, it's not been granted consent. It's effectively immune from enforcement action through the passage of time. So he's not granted it planning permission with a suite of conditions. The inspector has decided that based on his or the inspector's view, that the development is unauthorised but has become lawful, therefore immune from enforcement action, but he's not granted it planning permission per se, which would be with the associated conditions, and obviously any other building that would be with the occupancy condition. So that's why that original consent now has effectively gone, because what's built wasn't the definitive view that wasn't what was built. And any associated conditions have fallen with it.
So it makes a big difference to the market value now, though, of that property.
Or potentially, but that wouldn't have been a consideration for the inspector. It would have been on the issues I've outlined there. But that is it. It's unfortunate. We thought our grounds on the balance properties were strong, but that ultimately is the inspector's decision.
Right. Thank you, Andrew. Anybody else wish to comment on that appeal?
Just one comment. What did the inspector feel was an appropriate passage of time?
Oh, it's 4 years. Apologies for not making that clear.
4 years.
But an unauthorised building would be after a period of 4 years, as long as that can be proven, and in this case, clearly that it has been built for more than 4 years, that would become lawful. So, apologies for not making that clear.
Thank you, Andrew, for that explanation. Councillor Jordan.
Yes, I think this property was originally built by a chap called David Lewis, who's at Mardy Farm down at Llanwedd Citra. I think he probably did build it not in accordance with the original plans. Perhaps the moral of the story is that when we give consent for a dwelling, that our planners or building inspectors make sure that is actually built in accordance with what we've approved.
Touche. Thank you, Councillor Jordan. Craig, I believe you wish to comment to the committee.
No, I was only going to comment on what Councillor Jordan just raised in terms of the reviewing the plans. I think this case is a long-standing case. It's obviously in 1986, I think it was, the original consent. We have changed our structure now. We do have a permanent monitoring officer who goes out and reviews the plans and looks to ensure that this has been done in accordance with the approved plan. So I think there are some lessons learned here. We can certainly look at processes, but I do take Councillor Jordan's point on board in terms of ensuring that when the building is built, do a full inspection, ensure that it is in accordance with the approved plans, because obviously from this decision it's quite clear that has been given significant weight. So yeah, something that we certainly need to be mindful of in the future.
So if something was built and 12 months later the inspector went there, or the monitoring officer, they would be asked to put it right.
Yeah, or submit a following a retrospective planning application to regularise that, so we can work with customers on that.
Right, thank you, Craig. Councillor Jordan.
Yeah, if I can just add here, in these particular circumstances, the house has been built behind a stone wall that is probably 18 foot high. So unless you actually went through the former farmyard gates to inspect the property, you wouldn't have seen it from the road, because the roadside part of the development actually accords with the original plans. It's the elevation away from the road that you can't see that is different, and unless you actually made a point of making a specific visit to the site, you wouldn't have seen it from the road. So to that extent, it was a hidden development, and we've come across hidden developments in the past, haven't we?
Yeah, and I think it's more so with enforcement lists at the moment because of COVID, and there's not so much movement of people around the county as well. So I think enforcement are very, very busy at the moment. All right, anything else anybody wish to comment on? We've got the LDP at 5 o'clock, have we, Craig?
Yes, Madam Chair. If the meeting's finished, then I just wanted to catch members very quickly, just on just have an informal chat about another application, if possible.
All right, carry on, Craig.
Could we cancel the recording then, Madam Chair? Is that okay?
Yes, you can do. Yes.